He just stood there in the doorway, silent, still, eyes locked on mine. And then he asked me something no woman ever expects to hear from her stepson. My heart stopped. My stomach turned cold. I thought I misheard him. I wanted to believe I misheard him. But no, he meant every word. And in that moment, right then, right there, I knew something had shifted. Something that could never be undone. I can still see it. The way the hallway light hit his face, the quiet hum of the fridge in the background, the dull ache in my chest that had become all too familiar suddenly bursting into something louder. I wasn't prepared. Not for that moment. Not for what came next. And certainly not for how it would change the way I saw myself, my marriage, and him. I know this sounds like something pulled from a dramatic TV series you'd roll your eyes at, but this is my life. It really happened. And to this day, I still don't know if it was a cry for love or a cruel twist of fate. Maybe both. See, when you've spent years in the shadows of your own home, unseen, unheard, unfelt, even the slightest warmth feels like a fire. Even a whisper can sound like a song. And sometimes that warmth comes from the most unexpected places you should never go. But your heart doesn't always follow the rules your mind sets, especially when you're starving for something more. So when he looked at me that night, when Ethan, my 27-year-old stepson, spoke those words I never thought I'd hear from someone I helped raise, I felt my world quietly crack. And from that crack, things spilled out, things I didn't even know were still inside me. Shame, confusion, a dangerous curiosity. I haven't told many people this story. Honestly, I don't even know how I'd begin to explain it. But here I am, telling you, because maybe, just maybe, you'll understand. Maybe you've been there, in your own way. So if you've ever faced a moment that shook your values to the core, if you've ever felt torn between who you are and who you're becoming, stay with me. This story isn't easy. It's raw. It's real. And it will make you question things, maybe even yourself. But it needs to be told. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga, where real stories break the silence. Because sometimes silence is where the most dangerous secrets live. And tonight, I'm finally ready to speak mine. Let me take you back to how it all began. I was in my mid-40s, 46 to be exact, when I married Robert, my second marriage. You know how people say, it's not perfect, but it's better than being alone? That's kind of how it started. He was kind, stable, successful. After years of chaos in my first marriage, I thought, maybe this is what peace looks like. But peace can turn into emptiness when there's no real connection underneath. And that's what happened. Robert was always busy, work trips, client dinners, late night emails on the couch, back turned to me. We shared a home, a bed, a routine, but not a life, not a heartbeat, not anymore. Sometimes I'd speak and feel like the words just drifted past him like a breeze he barely noticed. And over time, I stopped trying to be heard, stopped trying to be seen. I became part of the furniture, present, but unnoticed. Then there was Ethan, Robert's son from his first marriage. He was 27, studying architecture at a university out of state, but came home during long weekends and school breaks. Tall, confident, that quiet kind of charisma that made people lean in when he spoke. But what stood out to me the most wasn't his looks or how he carried himself. It was the way he saw people. He asked questions. He listened. And not in that distracted, polite kind of way. He really listened. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me while I talked, his eyes fixed, like he actually cared about the answer. And after months, years really, of feeling like a ghost in my own home, that kind of attention felt foreign, warm, dangerous. We talked in the kitchen while I made dinner, or in the living room when Robert was out, or glued to his laptop. At first it was simple things, his classes, my work, random stories. But then he started asking about me, my life, my past, what I wanted for myself. No one asked me that anymore, not even Robert. There was always something about Ethan, something I couldn't name at the time. But I remember the feeling. It was like being seen in color again after living in gray for so long. And I told myself it was nothing. Just a young man being polite, just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew. I knew it wasn't nothing. Our home was beautiful on the outside, a clean, quiet place in a calm American suburb. Big windows, a neat garden, polished kitchen countertops. But on the inside, it often felt sterile, like a hotel suite that looked perfect but never felt lived in. Dinner was usually eaten in silence. Robert scrolling on his phone. Me staring at the candle flame, wondering if he even noticed I lit it. And Ethan, when he was home, was the only person who ever asked me how my day went, who ever looked me in the eyes when I answered. There was a day, I still remember it so clearly. I was sitting on the back patio, book in my lap, glass of wine in hand, watching the sky turn golden pink before sunset. Ethan walked out and sat beside me, without saying a word. We just sat there, for a minute. Then he said softly, "You look peaceful like this." My heart skipped. I felt my cheeks flush. I immediately looked away. It was such a simple comment, but it carried weight. It felt loaded. And the worst part? I liked it. I wanted to hear it. I remember thinking, what's wrong with me? Why does this feel so good? But I also knew exactly why. Because it had been so long since anyone made me feel like I mattered. Robert and I hadn't been intimate in months. Maybe longer. He was always too tired, too busy, too uninterested. We didn't argue, we just coexisted, like polite roommates who had once loved each other, but forgot how. And in that silence, in that space between what we were and what we pretended to be, Ethan's voice echoed the loudest. It wasn't just the things he said, it was the way he lingered in a room after everyone else had left, the way his fingers brushed mine when handing me a dish, the way he held my gaze for just a second too long. At the time, I kept brushing it off, telling myself I was projecting, reading too much into things, that I was just lonely, desperate for connection, craving affection wherever I could find it. But there was a shift happening, slow, quiet, like the way spring sneaks in after winter, one soft breeze at a time. And the truth is, I stopped wanting to brush it off. I started waiting for the next glance, the next conversation, the next reason to feel something again. Even if it came from a place it never should have, even if it meant everything I thought I knew about myself was about to change. I didn't know it then, but those tiny moments, those brief, innocent exchanges, they were the first cracks in the wall I'd built around myself. And once a wall begins to crack, it doesn't take much for it to fall. It was a Friday afternoon when Robert left for one of his usual weekend conferences. He kissed me on the cheek, like always, quick, routine, forgettable. His suitcase wheeled out the door with him, and just like that, the house fell quiet. A kind of silence I'd grown used to, but this time, Ethan was home. He'd come back from school the night before, dropped his bag in the hallway, kicked off his shoes like he owned the place. I didn't mind. In fact, the house felt a little warmer with him in it. There was music drifting from his room, laughter when he talked on the phone with his friends. That kind of energy that reminded me what it was like to feel alive. That evening, I was finishing up in the kitchen, just leftovers and a glass of wine, when he walked in. He leaned against the counter and asked, "Want to watch something tonight? Like old times?" I laughed a little. Old times. He used to say that when he was a teenager, home for the holidays when we'd watch cheesy Christmas movies and argue over popcorn flavors. It felt innocent, nostalgic, safe. "Sure," I said, just one word, but I felt it settle in my chest. Later, I changed into something casual, but nice. Not for him, I told myself. But when I walked into the living room and saw his eyes sweep over me, pausing just a second too long at my neckline, I felt it. That pause, that silence between his gaze and his words. "You look really beautiful tonight," he said. Soft, like he didn't mean to say it out loud, like it slipped through before he could catch it. I smiled, but it was tight, nervous. I sat down beside him, careful to leave space, but not too much. We watched something funny. I couldn't even tell you the name now, because all I remember is how I felt. The flicker of his eyes on me during the quiet moments, the way our hands brushed when we reached for the popcorn at the same time, how he didn't pull his away right away, and how I didn't either. My heart was too loud, my skin too awake. There was a part of me that wanted to run, to call it a night and retreat to the safety of my room. But another part, a deeper part, didn't want the night to end. The credits rolled, the lights still dim, and the silence wrapped around us like something sacred and dangerous. Then he turned to me, not smiling, not joking, just serious. His voice was low. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He hesitated, eyes locked on mine. "Do you ever feel lonely?" Just like that, my stomach dropped. His question hung in the air, soft but piercing. "Do you ever feel lonely?" I didn't answer right away. Because how do you explain a kind of loneliness that lives under your skin, that follows you from room to room, even when someone else is in the house? That creeps into your bones when you're lying beside a man who hasn't really seen you in months. I stared at the screen as the credits kept rolling. My throat felt tight, and for a moment, I wasn't in that room with Ethan. I was floating above it, looking down at this version of myself I didn't quite recognize anymore. I wanted to say no, I wanted to laugh it off. But the truth was, yes. God, yes. I'd felt lonely for so long, I stopped realizing it was loneliness. It became normal, a quiet ache, like a slow drip from a leaky faucet. You stop noticing until someone else points it out. And Ethan had just pointed it out. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. He wasn't trying to be clever, or seductive. He looked genuinely curious, worried even. I nodded, slowly, barely. And he didn't say anything else. He just sat there beside me, closer now. And that silence felt louder than anything either of us could have said. Later that night, lying in bed, I kept replaying that moment. His words, his eyes, the way he looked at me, like I was someone worth seeing. Not just another adult walking through the house half alive, but a woman with layers, with longing. I hated how it made me feel, and I hated that I didn't hate it more. I told myself he was just being kind. Maybe he sensed I'd been distant lately. Maybe he was trying to connect. Maybe it was all innocent. Maybe he didn't mean anything by it. Maybe I was just desperate to feel something again. Because the truth is, Robert never asked me how I was doing anymore. He never touched the small of my back in the kitchen, or slid his hand into mine during a movie. He never looked at me the way Ethan had looked at me that night. And I was starving for that kind of attention. I didn't even realize how empty I'd become, until someone started to fill the space. But the guilt crept in, just as quickly. It wrapped around me like a second skin. I pulled the covers tighter over my body, like I could shield myself from the thoughts crawling through my mind. Was I reading too much into it? Was something really happening here? Or was it all in my head? Maybe I was just vulnerable. Maybe I was projecting all of my unmet needs onto someone who simply cared. Someone who noticed when I wore earrings, or changed my hair, or lit a candle in the living room for no one but myself. I kept trying to find a way to explain it all, without feeling like a terrible person. But there was this voice inside me, quiet, but persistent, whispering things I didn't want to admit. The part of me that felt alive when he complimented me, the one that lingered in the living room just a little longer than necessary, the one that dressed with more care, just in case he was around. That part was growing louder, and the shame of it, the raw, ugly shame, was almost unbearable. But underneath it, right beneath the surface of all that guilt, was something else. Something dangerously close to desire. I told myself it was just curiosity, that I was only wondering what it meant to be seen again, to be noticed, to feel wanted. I told myself I wasn't crossing any lines, that a thought wasn't the same as an action, that loneliness makes you imagine things. But deep down, I knew. There was a current between us, something unsaid, but undeniably there. And the more I denied it, the stronger it seemed to pull me in. I kept telling myself, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But there was something intoxicating about finally being seen, not glanced at, not tolerated. Seen. And once you've been seen, it's hard to go back to being invisible. So I did what so many women do. I smiled in the daylight, pretended everything was fine. And at night, I stared at the ceiling with my heart pounding in my chest, asking myself a question I wasn't ready to answer. What if this doesn't stop here? After that night, after Ethan asked me if I ever felt lonely, something shifted between us. Nothing was said out loud. There were no rules broken, no boundaries crossed. Not yet. But the air changed. There was an unspoken awareness now, a quiet tension hanging between us like fog. Thick, invisible, but undeniably there. Robert was still away. And even when he came back, it was like he wasn't. He walked through the house like a visitor, briefcase in hand, mind elsewhere. He'd kiss my forehead, check his phone, ask about bills, and retreat to his office or the bedroom. The space between us was like a hallway with no doors, just distance. But Ethan was present. He'd linger in the kitchen while I cooked, lean against the counter, asking about my day. He'd help clean up without being asked, make me laugh with little impressions, tell me stories from school, his professors, group projects, the pressure to live up to his dad's expectations. One night, he said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm just a checklist to him. grades, internships, career path, but not a person. That stayed with me, because I knew exactly how that felt. He started opening up more, little by little, about the anxiety he tried to hide, the pressure, the loneliness he felt, even surrounded by people. And something about hearing those words, it made me feel close to him. Not in a physical way, at least not then. It was something deeper, emotional, almost maternal, but not quite. It blurred lines I didn't even realize existed. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, lingering in the kitchen a little longer, laughing a little louder, brushing flour onto my jeans just so I wouldn't have to wipe my hands in front of him. It sounds ridiculous, but when you haven't felt wanted in a long time, even the smallest flickers of connection feel like sparks. And I started dressing differently. Not drastically, just a little more thought. I'd put on the soft blouse instead of the old sweatshirt, lip gloss instead of nothing, perfume, even if I wasn't going anywhere. Not for him, I told myself, just for me. But I knew better. He noticed. I could feel it. In the way his eyes lingered a second too long, the way he smiled when I walked into the room, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me, like I mattered. And maybe that's what made it so dangerous, because I started to believe it too. The little touches began to creep in, light dot casual, but loaded with something unsaid. His hand grazing mine as we passed each other a bowl at dinner, his palm resting on my back as he moved past me in the hallway, his knee touching mine when we sat too close on the couch, and neither of us moved away. They were harmless moments, until they weren't. I had just finished showering. The door was pulled nearly closed, but not quite. I stood in front of the mirror, wrapped in a towel, brushing my hair, and I felt it, that prickle at the back of my neck. I turned slightly and saw the narrow sliver of space in the door, and his eyes. Ethan. He was watching. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there. And for a split second, just a second, I didn't cover myself. I didn't shout. I didn't slam the door. I froze. And in that stillness, 1,000 thoughts rushed through me. Shame, guilt, heat. A terrifying, intoxicating feeling I wasn't sure I could trust. He turned away before I said anything, disappeared down the hall like a shadow. And I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the crack in the door like it had betrayed me. I told myself it was a mistake, that maybe he didn't mean to look, that maybe he wasn't even watching me at all. But I knew better, and worse. I wasn't as horrified as I should have been. Later that night, the house was quiet again. Robert had gone to bed early, snoring softly on his side of the mattress. I got up to grab a glass of water, and there it was. A folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter, my name written on it. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, unfolded it slowly. Read the words. And what it said left me frozen. The note was short, just one line. Can we talk? There's something I need to ask you. Alone. My heart dropped the moment I read it. Not because I didn't know what it meant, but because I did. I stood in the kitchen with that paper in my hand, the silence of the house pressing in on me from every corner. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of wood settling in the night, even the sound of my own breath felt too loud. I looked toward the back patio, through the glass door. The porch light was on, and there he was, sitting on the steps, staring out into the darkness. I don't know what made me go out there. Curiosity, fear? A part of me that wanted to pretend it was all still innocent. And another part that knew we had already stepped too close to something we couldn't take back. I opened the door slowly. The air was cool against my skin, and everything smelled like cut grass. And night. He didn't turn around, just said, "Thanks for coming out." His voice was low, tense, like it cost him something just to say those words. I sat down beside him, leaving a space between us, but it still felt too close. The silence was thick, heavy. He took a deep breath. "I don't want to mess things up," he said, "but I need to be honest with you." My stomach tightened, my hands clasped together, knuckles white. I couldn't look at him, but I could feel his eyes on me. And then he said it, so softly I almost missed it. "I think about you all the time." I turned to him, stunned. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't playing a game. "I know it's wrong," he went on. "I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I don't see you as a stepmom. I see you as..." He paused, swallowed hard. "A woman." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My chest felt tight, like something was caving in from the inside. "I notice everything," he said. "The way you look when you laugh, the way you always light candles when it gets dark. The way you dress like you're not trying to impress anyone, but you still take my breath away. I should have stood up, should have shut it down right there, but I didn't. Because something in me, something quiet and bruised, had been waiting far too long to feel wanted, and he knew it. He looked at me, eyes full of something raw, trembling, and so real it made me ache. "Are you happy with my dad?" he asked. I flinched. He didn't wait for my answer. "Because I see the way he treats you, like you're just there, but you're not. You're incredible, and I can't stop thinking about what it would be like, if it were me, if it was us." That word, us, hung in the air like a siren, blaring, but silent. I stared straight ahead at the dark trees, swaying in the wind. My pulse pounded in my ears. I couldn't speak, because every word would have betrayed me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to deny everything and run back inside. But I didn't. I stayed. And in that awful, electric silence, where I said nothing and he said everything, a door opened that should have stayed locked forever. I didn't know what to say, but the silence between us said too much. After that night on the porch, everything changed. But neither of us said a word about it. We just stopped talking. The silence between us was no longer charged. It was heavy, awkward, sharp around the edges. The kind of silence that doesn't ask questions, because it already knows the answers. For days, we walked around each other like strangers. I'd pass him in the hallway, and he'd look away. I'd pour coffee in the kitchen and hear his footsteps turn, leave, before stepping in. No more long talks, no more quiet glances. Just distance. But it wasn't clean, that distance. It was messy, swollen with everything we'd left unsaid. I avoided his eyes because I was terrified of what I'd see in them. Pity, guilt, maybe even resentment. And maybe I was more terrified of what he might still see in mine, that I hadn't said no, that I hadn't walked away, that I'd stayed. I felt like I was unraveling, torn between shame and something else I couldn't name. Something that made my chest ache, not from love, but from being seen, and then abandoned. Robert came home that Thursday. He stepped inside, kissed my cheek, set his bag down, and paused. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded too quickly, smiled too tightly, and he didn't press, just like always. But I could tell he felt it. The tension, the shift in the atmosphere, the cold corners of the house we couldn't warm anymore. And Ethan, he barely came home after that. Started staying out late, said he was studying, hanging out with friends. But when he walked through the door, it was like a stranger entering the room. No eye contact, no small talk. Just footsteps down the hall, door shut behind him. I'd stand in the kitchen at night, hands trembling as I washed dishes that didn't need washing, listening to the echo of that closing door, and wondering what I had done, who I had become. Was this what it felt like to destroy something quietly? Not with fire or screaming, but with silence and suggestion. I felt sick most days. Not physically, but somewhere deeper. Like something inside me had cracked and wouldn't stop bleeding. I told myself I deserved it. The distance, the guilt, the silence. But part of me still waited, still hoped. That he'd come into the kitchen like before, say something simple like, "How was your day?" Like we could rewind time, undo the night we sat under the stars, and ruined everything. Robert didn't notice, or maybe he chose not to. He kept moving through life like usual, unaware that his wife was unraveling from the inside, unaware that the house was filled with the ghosts of things that almost happened, and things that did. One night, Robert had fallen asleep on the couch, TV buzzing softly in the background. I walked past Ethan's room. His door was slightly open, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, I stepped inside. His bed was unmade, books and clothes scattered, like he hadn't really settled in since coming home. It felt like a room in limbo, halfway between boy and man, halfway between belonging and running away. Then I saw it, tucked under his pillow. A small notebook. I don't know why I opened it. I shouldn't have. But I did. What I found inside shattered everything. It was small, worn, leather corners bent, pages soft from use. The kind of notebook you write in when no one's watching. Private, untouched by the outside world. I shouldn't have opened it. God, I know that. But once my fingers were around it, it felt like I had to. Like some part of me was bracing for a truth I already knew. The first few pages, nothing. Scribbles, class notes, drawings. But then, deeper in, there he was, laid bare, in his own messy, slanted handwriting. I sat on the edge of his bed, heart thudding in my ears. As I read, I don't know what's happening to me. I know I shouldn't feel this way about her, but I can't help it. She's everything he doesn't see. She listens. She laughs at my jokes. She makes me feel wanted, and I know it's wrong. I know it's messed up, but I dream about her. I think about her when I shouldn't. Sometimes I think she sees me too, not as a kid, as a man. I stopped breathing. I hate myself for wanting her. I hate myself for needing that connection. But when I'm near her, I feel like I can finally breathe, and I don't want to stop. That's when it hit me. All of it. The weight, the wreckage, the truth I had refused to name. This wasn't just a boy with a crush, or a woman craving affection. This was something deeper, more dangerous. This was two people, both lost in their own ways. And I was supposed to know better. I closed the journal with trembling hands, pressed it against my chest, as if I could erase what I'd just read. But it was already etched into me. I broke, right there, in his room. I curled up on the edge of his bed and cried until I couldn't feel my face. Not just because of what he felt, but because I had let it get this far. I was supposed to protect him, to guide him, to be the adult, to be the mother figure. Even if I never gave birth to him, even if we didn't share blood. That was the role I stepped into when I married his father. But I blurred the lines. I let my loneliness, my desperate hunger to feel wanted, cloud everything else. I kept seeing him not as a boy, but as someone who made me feel alive again. And that was the betrayal. Not to Robert, not even to Ethan, but to myself. Because what kind of woman does that? What kind of woman allows silence and glances and unspoken things to bloom into something this broken? I thought about Robert, his absence, his apathy, how for years I had slowly faded under his indifference until I became someone I didn't even recognize. I thought about how easy it was to justify attention when it came from someone who saw me, even if they had no business doing so. I thought about how I had stood at a crossroads and didn't walk away. And then I thought about Ethan, not as the man he was trying so hard to be, but as the boy he still was. Young, confused, searching. Trying to make sense of a world that was already too complicated for him. I failed him. And in some way, I failed myself too, because it was never really about Ethan. Not truly. It was about the hollow space inside me, the years of being overlooked, unheard, untouched. It was about the ache I carried like a secret, the longing I buried under clean countertops and polite conversations, the woman I lost, somewhere between wedding vows and late-night silence. And now here I was, sitting in a boy's bedroom, holding a notebook full of truths that were never meant for me to read. Broken, ashamed, and fully awake to what I'd allowed myself to become. Maybe it wasn't about him. Maybe I just wanted someone, anyone, to make me feel alive again. But at what cost? Have you ever been so lonely, so achingly alone inside your own life, that even the wrong kind of attention started to feel like salvation? I'm not proud of anything I've told you. I'm not here to pretend I was some kind of victim. I made choices. I ignored warning signs. I let silence grow roots in my marriage. And then I watered those roots with glances, with moments, with things I should have shut down. And maybe you've never been in a situation like mine. Or maybe, just maybe, you've brushed too close to that same edge. The kind where your heart whispers things, your mind tries to ignore. So I want to ask you, honestly, what would you have done? Have you ever faced a moment where your heart betrayed your morals? Where doing the right thing felt impossible because doing the wrong thing made you feel again? Please tell me. I don't say that just for attention. I say it because I need to know I'm not the only one. Leave a comment. Share your story. Even if it's messy, especially if it's messy, because these are the moments no one talks about. But too many of us carry them quietly. And if this story moved you, even if it made you uncomfortable, even if it made you think, then maybe that's exactly the point.